Halo semuanya, nama saya Janette Suherli. Saya alumni S1 Astronomi ITB, sekarang sedang doing my PhD in Canada at University of Manitoba with Dr. Samar Safi Harb. So pada kesempatan kali ini, I will be giving a talk titled Optical Integral Field Spectroscopy Study of Supernova Remnants. There will be three main parts of my talk today. I will go through a brief scientific motivation of supernova remnants research, and then I will talk about the breakthrough in SNR research made possible by integral field spectroscopy technique. And then I will share a little about the ongoing and future works of the SNR optical group at University of Manitoba. First of all, we all know that supernova is an energetic explosive event that occurs either when a massive star reaches its last evolutionary stage, or when a white dwarf in a binary star is triggered into a runaway nuclear fusion. When a supernova explosion happens, the progenitor either collapses to a neutron star or black holes or completely destroyed, and the ejecta spills out into the space, forming the beautiful diffuse nebula that we see, the supernova remnant. So these violent explosions produce all the heavy elements in the universe. It is the sole event that provides the chemical enrichment into the interstellar medium. So the image sequence on your right is the artist's impression of Cassiopeia A supernova explosion. It shows that when Cas A progenitor star collapsed under the weight of its own gravity, the explosion briefly outshined its surrounding and at the same time blew its outer layers into space. So we know that supernova is a very important object in astrophysics. However, supernova are rarely observed in our galaxy. Adams et al. 2013 stated that there should be one galactic supernova every 22 years. But the last observed event in our galaxy was Kepler supernova in 1604. So it has been 400 years. But it is not that there were no supernova in our galaxy for the past 400 years. We just cannot observe them due to the dust blocking the light. So what we can do is focus our study on supernova remnants, which will remain visible for thousands of years after the stellar explosions. Another intriguing part that makes studying supernova remnant crucial is the compact object leftovers. So I mentioned that the progenitors that survive the supernova explosions collapse into either neutron stars or black holes. Among many different subclasses of neutron stars that have been observed, here I want to highlight a unique class of young isolated neutron stars called central compact objects, or CCO. From its name, central compact object, it is very general, very ambiguous. So this paints a picture of how poorly we understand this object. This could be attributed to the fact that there are only a handful, by handful I mean 10, confirmed CCOs observed in our galaxy. So what we know so far about CCOs are they have low surface magnetic fields, their characteristic ages being order of magnitude larger than their hosting SNR ages. And another and the most interesting and important fact about CCOs that particularly is of our interest of our group is that CCOs shines exclusively in X-rays. They have no observed counterparts in any other wavelengths. So studying supernova remnants and their interactions with the surrounding interstellar matter is fundamental to further constrain the basic parameters of these objects. Next is about the integral field spectroscopy. So the instrumentation for integral field spectroscopy was developed in the 80s, and radio astronomers were actually the early adopters of this method before it finally makes its ways to optical research. So in traditional spectroscopy, we all know that a slit or a single aperture is placed into the focal plane. Then the light from the object goes through the slit and is dispersed by the spectrograph onto the detector. The disadvantage of this method is it is very time consuming, especially if you want to cover a full object. It requires several consecutive exposure, sometimes with alter slit positions. So this method also prone to errors in pointing and temporal changes when doing different exposures. Integral field spectroscopy specifically aims at addressing these problems by allowing doing spectroscopy of a two-dimensional area of an image plane in a simultaneous way. It also combines spectroscopic and imaging power. So as the spectrum of each spatial element is taken at the same time, the result, the spectrum that we get is more stable and uniform. So here, the image on the left shows you three different techniques of integral spectroscopy. Basically, the differences are the way the spectrograph input are arranged and the way the dispersed light is projected onto the detector. But ultimately, they produce the same three-dimensional data that we call data cube. A data cube is essentially a stack of many images at different wavelengths of the same spatial plane. Here, the image on the right is an illustration of what a data cube is. So you can see here it has two spatial dimension, the RA and declination, and the third one being wavelength. So by studying or using integral field spectroscopy, we can study astronomical objects in a more effective way, especially if you have complex structures or you have many objects in the same field of view. So this relatively new field of integral field spectroscopy has revived Supernova Remnants research at optical wavelength, and it has shown a lot of incredible potentials for discoveries. Early this year, Martin et al. Using CTEL on Canada, France, Hawaii telescope, they did a deconvolution and kinematic reconstruction of Crab Nebula. So they find that the general boundaries of the 3D volume occupied by the crab are not ellipsoidal as we commonly assume. So instead, it appears to follow a heart-shaped distribution that is symmetrical about the plane of the pulsar wind torus, here represented by the red arrow. Another one is in 2019, Seidan Zhao and his group, they discovered coronal broad lines of sulfur 12, iron 9, and iron 15 in SNR 0509, which allows for the study of shock and pre-shock parameters. And one of this absolute highlight of integral field spectroscopic capability in SNR research is the work done by Fott et al. 2018. So he and his group using MUSE data discovered a ring of cold gas in the recommendation line of neon 1 and oxygen 1 here in the pink. And surprise, surprise, in the center of that ring, there's an X-ray point source. So the group also did energy distribution calculation, and they argued that the point source is indeed a CCO. So this is potentially the very first time a CCO are identified in the optical wavelength. And here is some of the works that we are doing right now at U of M. So our group required a higher resolution data of Vela Junior supernova remnant. And the goal is to study the nebula around the CCO location. As you can see here on the image of at the bottom, the white symbol here shows you the location of the CCO, and there's a huge nebula around it. Previously from other works, using Hubble data, they thought that it's a H-alpha nebula, but instead our data in high resolution shows that it's actually shine strongly in nitrogen 2. The series of image here show you the intensity distributions of several prominent emission lines. And on top of it are the contour of nitrogen 2 emission. You can see here that the heavier the element is, such as sulfur and argon, the distribution of the nebula seems to be more concentrated towards the northern side. So with this new high resolution data, we would be able to provide reliable flux calibration and a much better spatial map of the CCO nebula. And also we could assess the connection between the bubble or the nebula and the CCO to finally constrain the nature of the mysterious CCO. So this, and with the work of Fott et al. 2018 that I mentioned before, this is actually the very first time that the CCO's interaction with their environment are observed in optical wavelength. this opens a new exciting door to CCO observations outside X-ray regime. And last one is another our exciting work is a following up of the discovery of the ring around the E0102 supernova remnant. So we have observation with the Very Large Telescope in Chile, but the observation was halted because of COVID. So now it's carried out into the next period, next observing period. So we're hoping to get new data next year. So we're hoping to see some exciting stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janette. Question and answer. Is there anyone who want to ask question or give comments from the audience? I'm sure Janette wouldn't mind if the question is in Bahasa Indonesia as well.
Yes, yes.
Okay, Daud, Muhammad Daud, please.
Terima kasih, Ibu. Saya ingin bertanya Pak dengan bahasa Indonesia ya, Bu.
Ya, mangga.
Silakan.
Iya, kan cukup diketahui kalau objek kompak itu bisa kita ketemui pada sistem bintang ganda begitu ya. Misalnya low mass X-ray binary atau high mass X-ray binary gitu.
Yes.
Apakah pada supernova remnant itu ada ditemui gitu companion dari objek kompaknya gitu?
Ya, ada beberapa studi. Actually salah satu Papis A itu supernova remnant di galaksi Milky Way yang cukup terkenal. Itu si supernova, bukan supernova, progenitorsnya banyak beberapa studi yang menunjukkan kalau itu actually punya companion yang survived.
Oh, yeah.
Ya, kalau bisa dilihat Papis A, ya itu ada beberapa kasus yang ada beberapa studi yang menunjukkan kalau si companionnya itu bisa diamati.
Oh, iya,
Dan survive the explosion. Ya.
Iya. Oh, oke, terima kasih, Raju.
Iya.
Baik, terima kasih. Next, Pak Muhammad Yusuf, please.
Ya, makasih. Ini menarik sekali, Bu Janette.
Terima kasih.
Pertanyaan saya yang tadi, kalau misalkan Janette kan masih butuh data spektroskopi resolusi tinggi ya. Nah, seberapa tinggi ordernya meter per detik ini soalnya menyangkut misalkan nanti di Observatorium Nasional akan punya spektrograf gitu. Kita bisa prediksi apakah jenis pekerjaan ini visible untuk dilakukan di Observatorium Nasional.
I see. Kalau jadi data atau observasi follow up untuk E0102 itu pakai Muse. Muse itu resolusinya 3000. Resolusi spektrografi 3000.
Oke, sip, makasih.
Iya.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Yusuf. Masih ada waktu untuk pertanyaan, dipersilahkan bila ada yang ingin menyampaikan pertanyaan maupun komentar.
Ya, terima kasih Bu Kiki. Ya, terima kasih Kak Janette, sangat menarik. Targetnya berapa objek ya yang akan diamati atau di follow up?
Interesting question. Jadi CCO sendiri belum banyak. Jadi saat at least by paper 2017 baru 10 yang confirm. Jadi yang E0102 ini itu extragalactic kan. Dan paper vote 2018 itu banyak yang mendebat. Jadi banyak yang berargumen kalau si point source-nya itu bukan CCO. Jadi kayak masih banyak katalog CCO-nya sendiri masih sangat kecil. Jadi untuk mencari counterpart dari CCO-nya sendiri ini actually semuanya by chance. Jadi yang kebetulan si H Alpha Nebula ini awalnya di paper at least 2015 ya. Studi terakhir dengan Hubble data, mereka pun bilang kalau ini nggak ada hubungannya karena bukan dari fotoionisasi si neutron star-nya. Jadi ini kayak by chance dia ada di tempat itu aja, kayak satu arah dari kita ngelihatnya. Nah, jadi untuk saat ini belum ada list target karena memang belum banyak katalognya aja.
Berarti apa ya? Pencarian kandidatnya agak tricky gitu ya?
Iya, betul sekali. Iya. Jadi
menarik, Kak.
sebenarnya kalau yang dari si E0102 itu ada follow up study-nya. Jadi maksudnya follow up study karena itu kan actually ketemunya by chance. Jadi dia ketemu ring itu dari high resolution spectroscopy data, terus kebetulan ada X-ray point source. Nah, Ford waktu itu berpikir, wah gimana kalau kita carinya kebalik. Jadi kita maksudnya kebalik tuh kita cari di optical dari semua CCO yang ada di titik di lokasi CCO-nya itu di optical apakah ada ring yang serupa gitu. Jadi di line si neon 1 and oxygen 1 itu. Tapi kebetulan nggak ada. Jadi waktu itu saya sempat ikut grupnya itu dari Papis A sama satu PKS. Saya lupa aja ada 2 galactic supernova remnant itu kosong. Jadi di line yang sama nggak ada ring yang serupa. Padahal age-nya sama gitu. Jadi kayak age supernovanya sama. Ya itu jadi masih misteri.
Siap. Oke, terima kasih Kak Janette. Ditunggu papernya.
Iya, semoga ada kabar.
Baik, terima kasih. Ini sangat menarik. Tapi